Black Flag Resynced is exactly what Assassin's Creed needed right now. The original Black Flag in 2013 was the game that broke away from the traditional Assassin's Creed formula and played looser with its commitment to the assassins as a central narrative, focusing on the golden age of piracy's downfall while keeping the assassins present and relevant throughout the story. It marked a major turning point in the broader narrative as well. The games leading up to Black Flag had an overarching narrative and character through lines. Black Flag was the first to tilt towards a standalone adventure while retaining elements of that previous era, such as the modern day storyline, to bridge the gap between the games that came before and the new formula that would follow after, being more of an anthology series. In this sense, it's the perfect game to remake in 2026. Assassin's Creed Shadows was a severely flawed title because fans of the franchise were split between the RPG era and the classic games, a divide that had been raging for about a decade now, and while Black Flag is in no way an RPG, it was the game that opened the floodgates for that to happen, and so it's a title that can please both original and newer fans. It was also the only game aside from AC1 that hadn't had any port or remaster to newer gen consoles. With the delisting of its DLC on Steam and the multiplayer servers being offline, which also locked off community events and rewards, the state of the game was certainly in need of attention. Resynced goes with the remake treatment. It puts the world of Black Flag onto the Anvil pipeline engine used for Assassin's Creed Shadows and piggybacks off the advancements and quality of life changes that the game brought to the mechanics of the franchise, steering it back towards a focus of the core pillars, stealth, parkour and combat that the RPG games steered away from. Before we get into it, I want to give a massive thank you to Ubisoft for providing me with an early review code of the game, which let me play 10 days in advance and properly explore everything it has to offer. I know the original game is 13 years old, but I'd still like to keep things spoiler light as we go through what's been changed here. My initial impression of Black Flag Resynced was great. AC Shadows crashed my PC on the first day of release, and it wasn't until I got a new PC that the game started to run smoothly. I'm pleased to say Black Flag ran at a consistent 60 FPS on high settings on my PC, and that's while I was recording my playthrough at the same time, so off air I was able to raise the settings even more. The game is also a third of the size of Shadows at only 51GB on PC, which is much more ideal for storage, and it doesn't feel like any of the detail from Shadows was lost or compromised to make this happen. In fact, the remake looks even better than Shadows by a long shot. The world of Black Flag is stunning. The graphics are nothing shy of gorgeous, and match that with the denser locations that are designed for traversal and exploration rather than sliding down slopes for hours, and Black Flag's world is just a treat to be in. This extends to the presentation of the story as well. The original motion capture performances from Black Flag are still present, along with the cinematic storytelling the game excelled at. Everybody looks and feels great, although some characters are quite inconsistent in their looks from cutscene to cutscene. I chalk this up to the original motion capture twisting the new faces in unnatural ways, but that's not really the case. The worst offender is actually Edward. You could see this leading up to launch, but his face model is very inconsistent. Sometimes I looked at him and thought, that's literally him, and sometimes he'd look a bit unrecognisable. I thought James Kidd also came across this way, with the cutscene model and the in-game model looking very different, and even Adewale seemed off at times. That said, this is still the story of Black Flag. Cutscenes are preserved with care, and although some facial expressions and reactions differ from the original, they still convey the same purpose in the scene and match the vocal performances. This is not a half-assed job in any sense. Edward's journey has been expanded and touched up in so many places that it's difficult to remember what was in the original and what's in the remake. There's that much added dialogue and extra interactions thrown on top. An example I'd like to give is in the first scene where we're introduced to Ben Hornigold and Edward Thatch. Now we have an introduction to Anne Bonny first and chat with her on the stairs leading up to the scene. She then appears next to Ben before swapping places with Thatch for that original cutscene to take place. Then James Kidd is mixed in with the scene as well later to make it a more dynamic scene that doesn't feel messy or overstuffed. Even though the presentation does dip a little bit, as you can tell these are not the original motion capture performances, it's the right kind of addition that introduces you to the main roster of pirates much better than in the main game, and that's not a rare occurrence. Resynced has moments like this from start to finish, whether it's Matt Ryan providing new voiceover from Edward to add a bit of context to his thoughts, or new interactions with the main roster. It's not perfect, but it's very well integrated with what was already there in the original and enhances the experience. At least, I felt this way in the early hours. As the game goes on and some of the newer elements start to seep in, there were some particular moments where I felt the new additional content was incredibly shoehorned in, like they'd taken really pivotal, important moments in the game and artificially inserted something to set up a new side quest in ways that sometimes detracted from the original intent of the scene. Now this extends to the audio too. In the lead up to the launch, I thought Matt Ryan's performance in the new content with Lucy Baldwin sounded very different from his original performance. However, in-game, when you can match it all together, it was totally unnoticeable, and I had no idea when we were swapping between new and old dialogue. That's across the board as well. The marketing has put Matt Ryan front and centre to promote the game, but it should be noted that a lot of the original cast have returned and sound exactly the same. Mary Reed's actress has a great new interaction with Edward about his motivation for leaving his wife behind, and she sounds exactly the same as she did in the original. Adewale's actor too gets a lot more to do this time round. I felt Adewale's dialogue on the Jackdaw had been beefed out to make him more developed, as he has new responses and comments on different scenes. Again though, new and old dialogue is blended really well, so it's totally masked the illusion for me. So at least from an audio standpoint, I think they've done a really good job with the new content. As you'd expect, all the performances from the main story cast are great, and I say that intentionally because, as you know, there is new content to get to. But in terms of the OGs, their performances still hold up to date and are incredibly well acted. Mark Boner as Blackbeard in particular delivers a great layered performance. He's not just an evil cackling Blackbeard, but a man with depth and motivation, and he smartly uses fear to his advantage. Olivia Morgan as James Kidd and Mary Reed is also great. I think the updated face model fits her voice so much better than the previous one, which makes the performance less distracting. A critique I think everyone had in the original game is that when James Kidd speaks for the first time, you can tell it's a woman voicing him, which ruins the surprise later on. In this version, Kidd's features are softened, which makes the voice fit so much better with the face model, and I appreciated more of Olivia's great line deliveries. Of course, I don't need to mention that Matt Ryan is phenomenal as Edward, and his range as the character is what gives Edward such a human quality that's essential to his flaws and ultimate redemption. That said, if I was going to complain about any of the performances, I'd say in the early hours of the game, Matt Ryan's original dialogue sounds like it's been tampered with in post. It's like he's a few centimeters from the microphone, like they've increased the gain, and they've added more vocal effects to make him better match how Matt sounds today. It's exactly the same performance, he hasn't re-recorded anything, the inflections are the same, but something about the voice sounds like it's been put through post-processing to blend better with the new dialogue. After a few hours this seems to go away and he starts to sound like everyone else, but in those first few hours I found it really distracting. Now the structure of the game has also naturally changed from the original, as the entire modern day section has been cut out, with the collectibles you would get there now being in the open world in Black Flag, giving you the modern day notes and videos like in the original. I can't say I miss the modern day at all, in fact. Just having the story play out without interruptions is so much better for the game's pacing, and if they do like an AC3 Resynced, I think the game will benefit even more without being pulled out of the Animus. What this does is free up a lot of time to allocate to the new content, like a couple of flashback scenes with Caroline or the previously mentioned expanded cutscenes, letting scenes breathe more. What they don't particularly do well is the transitions between scenes and where the modern day would have been inserted, especially the first one at the beginning of the game. You'll recall that in the original, Edward and Steed leave the island, then we get a voiceover from Melanie LeMay, and we're pulled out of the Animus for an introduction to Abstergo Entertainment. When we return to the Animus, we appear in Havana, and the title card drops for the game. In Resynced, we get an awkward few seconds where Melanie's dialogue obviously doesn't play, but the cutscene still does. Then the screen goes black, and it opens back up in Havana, where the music cue comes in late, and the title appears totally out of sync. The screen transition without music feels super awkward, and I don't know why they couldn't just bring the music in as a transition to the title card. It makes it super obvious where the modern day cut was made, and it looks really sloppy on a first impression of the game. Now let's talk about the purely new story content. It's far and wide. You'll be treated to a new butler at the hideout with his own dedicated questline around the history of the building, the new officers for the Jackdaw that give you bonuses for your ship, and there are even rifts carrying over from Shadows' Ego's storyline that deal with what-if scenarios that branch from the main plot. Some of the new content does work. As much as the Lucy Baldwin missions got a lot of flack before release, it is just a half an hour long story which comprises of about 4 or 5 missions that are ultimately just a side quest, which I don't consider offensive, and honestly, Lucy's character model and facial expressions are pretty damn good for a majority of her screen time. It's more so Edward Kenway that drops his entire personality and becomes an NPC for her level. And it's the treatment of Edward that further highlights that these are not the people who wrote the original game. These are new writers that don't fully understand maybe Edward's quirks and character traits, as I found a lot of the writing seems to paint Edward in a really different picture from how he does in the main game. It feels really weird, however, to have these new officers join the Jackdaw as the themes of the story are highlighting that everyone around Edward is dying. Spoiler alert, I guess, but it just made for a really distracting contrast between what's happening in the main story and what's happening in the new side quests. The other officer quests are really good too. I especially liked Padre's inclusion in the game, not just for the religious context of the time period, which I found really interesting, but also the way he parallels Edward's story. It's proof that you can't get out of this life, even though he was a pirate who's now moved away. That sort of comes back to bite him. His past comes back and, without spoiling, drags him back in and leads to a tragedy. And I thought that was really interesting because we know what happens to Edward. We know that he goes away from this life and it doesn't end well for him, and I definitely thought they were doing some sort of foreshadowing with that storyline. It was very interesting for me. I thought Padre was really interestingly written to be a bit more morally grey, and a really nice touch, I think, is that when you're raiding a fort or when you're boarding a ship, Padre will join you and he will participate in the fight, and that makes it feel like he's a more tangible part of the story, or he's a character that isn't just sitting in the back for like a menu, you know, he's not just a menu screen or an extra ability, he is a character that is interacting throughout the world, and I thought his in particular was a standout. What doesn't work is the new epilogue, and I really genuinely hated this inclusion. I thought the way it was introduced by being jammed into the most pivotal moment in the game totally destroys an important scene so that it can just be set up later. And if you know Black Flag, you know the moment I'm talking about. There is a particular moment about halfway through the game where everything changes and the tone changes drastically, and that moment is undercut because they are more interested in setting up this epilogue to happen later in the game, and they just could not find an organic way of introducing it. And to be honest, I'm probably going to do a whole video on it because I just thought it was genuinely just so poorly prepared. Now we get on to the rifts, and oh boy, I hope I'm allowed to say that in the document detailing my embargo for the review, I was told what each of the what-if scenarios were, and I was very intrigued. I won't spoil what they are, but when it came to the reality of what these rifts are, I think it's incredibly important for me to say, lower your expectations. These rifts are exactly the same as in Shadows. The eagle guy with the goofy voice and the monotone guide characters return, and the plotline from the final rift of Shadows, where we broke everyone out of the Animus, continues, and it's awful. I'm sorry, these are just straight up time wasters, and the what if scenarios are just still character models that you walk around whilst the guide tells you how the character is feeling leading up to it. I only played one of these and had no interest in playing any more. The guide and eagle loudly express Edward's character flaws, thought process and motivations because, as we know, subtext is for cowards. It almost ruins the story by loudly exclaiming the game's themes like some kind of after-show podcast, but I'm only on sequence 4. If you have any interest in the concept of these what-ifs, then I'm afraid that at least the first one never explores the concept. The whole mission just leads up to the event itself and then ends without any cutscene of the event playing out. It's just crappy Animus puzzle solving that's too on the nose and a far cry from the creepy Animus interactions we had in those original games. Hell, I'd rather they bring back the first person Desmond Minecraft levels than continue this. Now, let's talk about the gameplay because this is where you'll find the biggest deviations from the original. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's start with the general feel and movement. Parkour has been carried across from the last Shadows update, which includes free jumps, and when you first load up the game it'll prompt you on whether you want to have a more on-rails parkour experience or to go for the advanced options that give you more freedom and room to fuck up more. We saw this in Mirage and Shadows, but here is where it feels more refined, particularly in the animations. The feeling of momentum and movement matching the character's speed was a huge issue in AC Mirage because it used the incredibly slow Valhalla parkour and artificially sped up the animations. Shadows' parkour updates were made post-launch, so new animations weren't made for the logic-defying leaps, which left it looking janky and unrealistic, even if the feeling from doing it was great and responsive. This is the first AC game in a long time where the weight and character movement doesn't feel floaty or tacky. Edward feels heavy, and his movements respond to the weight of the character. His jumps have heft. There's some real attempt to remove the awkward pauses in between parkour animations, and it feels the most seamless because of it. Edward's free jumps actually have a different animation to them as well. Edward has a brand new jump animation made just for these kinds of moves, so you'll know when you're doing them. While I'll leave the deeper analysis of parkour to someone like Ropatopoulos, I'll say that the responsiveness and feeling felt great to me. The only thing you're missing from the original is the flashy vaults that Edward would do on low objects, and although Shadows' vaults are reused, they're nowhere near as flashy or fun to pull off as in the original. Also, the reuse of Yasuke's downward parkour vault felt amazing. I was really glad that they brought that back. I will say that at some points doing parkour reminded me more of Mirage than Shadows. It's difficult to pinpoint why I felt that way, maybe it's the denser city, but I felt it resembled that update more than the Shadows one at times. Again, I'm sure people can look into that further. The reason I feel parkour is important to discuss is that the game's world and level design have undergone a total overhaul. You can't just close your eyes and play the game if you memorise the original level layout, because even from the first island, the geometry has been totally changed to fit less of a checklist traversal style, and that's to say that in the original game, set paths were laid out so you would naturally parkour around an island and cross paths with all of the collectibles. Here the environments feel designed more so to give you options instead, and add more density like extra huts, structures, new parkour tree paths, for more freedom and make the islands feel more immersive than one set path. Also, because you can now dive, some underwater caves can be accessible by diving under the water instead of using the diving bell, although diving bell sequences still exist as they did in the original. This also leads to new stealth opportunities. I instinctively walked into a bush expecting to auto-crouch, and forgot that the crouch button now exists. What I will say is the stealth in Black Flag Resynced is a massive step back from AC Shadows and feels less challenging overall. Enemies are no longer sensitive to noise or light, you can't go prone or hide in the shadows, only in dense vegetation, which makes the day-night cycle of the game feel more for show like in the original. The actual level design, however, has been made more interesting than the original. For example, in early sequences, you get a tutorial on how to raid a plantation, stealing a key from a guard and opening it. In the original game, you eavesdrop on a pair of guards mentioning that it's someone's birthday to provide context on the relaxed nature of the guards. This has been expanded on in Black Flag Resynced, and now a party is being held for the plantation owner's son's birthday during the level. There are fireworks going off before you even reach the island, which reminded me of the party in Rogue. You now need to infiltrate the party and get the key from the owner's son, which is just a nice way of adding a bit more variety to the level design and incorporating stealth into more than just crouching in bushes. It's also great to flesh out the one line of dialogue from the original and redesign the level better to fit it, which is what a good remake should do. I suppose tailing is also an extension of stealth. Tailing missions were rampant in the original, and here they return but become for the most part completely skippable. You can just kill the target and they'll always have a note that you can read instead to get the information you need. This significantly improves the game's pacing and makes it feel much less tedious. To be honest, I also feel like stepping back from Shadows would make tailing missions just as boring as the original, which is probably why they didn't try to improve them and instead opted to make them easier. Alright, so now on to combat. This is an area I'm a little conflicted about. It feels a lot more like the original than you might expect from its appearance. The The abilities in the RPG games are what kept the combat from being button mashing all the time, but here, the abilities, if you want to call them that, are like the pistol, quick shot, the rope dart, a kick, and a leg sweep. They're all pretty useless aside from the pistols. I found the kick and the sweep to be countered so often and to have such a weirdly long wind up that the chances of getting hit during the animation increased exponentially. Your best bet is to just spam attack until you get the takedown prompt, which makes it very similar to the original game. Of course, there's dodging, rolling, and parrying, so we go from the original game having the counter button that would do it all for you, to pressing the left bumper to parry normal enemies and the roll button to avoid larger enemies, which takes the combat from Black Flag, 13 years later, from one counter button to two. Which still makes it very easy, and in my case, I had the Swords of Altair, which let me chain kill 4 times like in the original, so for better or worse, it felt more like the original than I expected, and while the reuse of animations from the original looked great, and I liked the cinematic camera kills, where it did some epic slow motion, the fact you only have swords makes the combat feel more repetitive, as you can't pick up or use any other weapons. There are 3 sword types in the game, which only really lead to a different heavy attack. You either have this big sweep, you've got a stab, or for the pistol swords you just get to shoot the gun, which didn't really lead to much variety when it came to combat in general. The pistols are back, of course, and I firstly like the detail that you get the chest pistols first in the game, which means you can get that iconic look for Edward immediately without having to craft the other holsters. The reason I think they've done this is because they knew all of the outfits in the game were going to get the strap across the chest, and it would look weird if you didn't have any guns to put in them, so ahead of time, they just give you those guns straight away. The sound design on them is a little weird. It sounds like you're shooting clay or mud because the pistols now sound very chunky, which I didn't like. Also, there are some variants of the pistol that let you go full John Wick mode, like a pistol that doesn't consume ammo as long as you're anonymous, which just let me start blasting, and a pistol that slows down time, which I'm sure will lead to some crazy edits. Now, a big complaint leading up to the game's release was the removal of Hidden Blade combat, but I think that what they've gone for instead is a pretty good compromise that may be a hot take, but I actually really like it. In Assassin's Creed 1, the Hidden Blade could be used to land a one-shot in open combat, but couldn't be used to counter or parry attacks. You just had to dodge, then kill, which had a much closer window than the other weapons to secure that one shot. Resynced brings us closest to that original vision since that game came out by making the Hidden Blade a timing-based opportunity. If you press the takedown prompt as soon as it appears, and you're within close proximity of your target, you will execute a Hidden Blade kill using the animations from the original game. If you press it too slowly or you're too far away, you will swap to a sword execution. This means in theory, you can chain together 4 kills and swap between Hidden Blades and swords as you kill all of them, but instead of it being a manual selection, the game decides for you based on the environmental conditions. The Hidden Blades only being able to secure a kill at an extremely close range makes perfect sense to me. These weapons are meant for concealed kills, they are not Wolverine's claws, and I think for the modern games, this is the best alternative. I think what people really want is the ability to just pop your Hidden Blades out at random while walking around, because that is extremely satisfying, and we haven't been able to do it since AC Rogue, which still sucks. On that note, the assassinations look pretty good for the most part. The reuse of previous games' animations like Unity means we have much better responsiveness with your target, but I still notice that stupid slash from Valhalla can trigger in Black Flag, and I don't know why. There's also reused double assassinations from Now Is Tanto that look a bit awkward because we know the original context, but as an animation, it does look pretty good. But then again, in the original game, a lot of Edward's sword assassinations were reused from Connor's tomahawk, which looks pretty janky in the original game, and I just love that they doubled down on it here. I think the air assassination from AC Shadows was awful. It cut from a backwards shot awkwardly to a front-facing shot, for no reason other than to hide the character's model moving into place to perform the animation. Black Flag still cuts to a different angle, but it's still from the back and actually felt great in my opinion. The cut is at just the right moment for maximum impact. It feels a lot more like you're furiously jumping down on your opponent and not a small hop like in Shadows. The weight and impact look great, and I'm pretty happy with this being the norm going forward. It's just cool to have double hidden blades again permanently and not just Tanto specific assassinations. What I'm not a fan of, however, is the sound the hidden blades make. The sound effects for them are really weird, and I can't wait for a mod that removes it. The sound is like a treasure chest opening or like a reward. It's that shiny flash of something valuable, and sounds nothing like a blade piercing someone's neck. The hidden blade hasn't sounded good in a long time, but this artificial shiny noise put over the top, which by the way is really quiet, sounds terrible and doesn't have the punch the hidden blade should have at all. Now let's talk about the ship combat. This is pretty much exactly the same as the original, to be honest. Little has changed here because little needed to. It played great in 2013 and aged well enough to be nearly entirely intact in 2026, which is a testament to how revolutionary that technology was at the time. The only change of note is being able to swap between weapons like in AC3, where the chain shot wasn't allocated to the front but a cannon type you could choose for the broadside. There are further weapons you can unlock down the line by completing forts, like the front side cannons from AC Rogue, which is a great way of incorporating the additions that game made. I felt like the ship was a little smoother to control as well, like the turns are a bit quicker, nowhere near the level of ease that Odyssey had, but honestly, no notes, it's pretty much exactly the same as the original and it feels great. I'll talk a bit about customization, but by the time this video is out, I'm also going to release an unscripted look at all of the outfits I've unlocked so far, which you'll be able to watch straight after this one if you're interested in my thoughts on the outfits themselves. What I will say across the board is that they cooked. Edward's robes look amazing and the physics on the majority of the outfits are top tier. I noticed that many of the clipping issues I had leading up to launch are completely fixed, and the fun of seeing old outfits remade so well was amazing. Even the stealth outfit with its leg warmers looks awesome in the updated engine. What I will say is that they have severely changed the way you unlock outfits in this game. In the original, it was pretty cut and dry. It was either you get them from the shop or there are specific side quests you complete or collectibles, and once you've collected them all, you get the outfit. In this game, it is totally random. There's like 3 in the shop, there's 3 at a random place in the Great Inagua, there's like treasure chests that have them, there's a random chest in Havana that has the brown cloak, and I had to I didn't have a guide because I'm making this video when the game comes out. I did not have a guide. I had to speak to other YouTubers to figure out where the outfits were located because I don't think the game does a good job of illustrating where they all are. And yes, I'm sure you will have all seen by now, if you go into the exchange, you can find Connor's outfit from Assassin's Creed 3. We do not have Ezio's or Altair's yet, but after over a decade of not seeing this outfit, I did genuinely have like a reaction seeing it back. I was like, wow, it's incredible to see it after all this time. Maybe it's a hint at the next resync? We can only hope. The Animus hub has had a bit of a rejig, letting you see an old school synchronization bar. If you squint, it's not really, but there's challenges to complete during the story which relates to sequences that can earn you keys. These keys can get you legacy weapons and outfits like Ezio's Kajil from Revelations or the previously mentioned Altair's swords. I hope that more are added in the future as we're still missing a lot of content from the original game, like Ezio and Altair's outfits. There's also a store page. In the pre-release build, I couldn't see the pricing for any of these outfits, but what I will say is they naturally look completely insane, and that's all we'll say about that. I don't know where else to mention this, but the UI is very much based on Shadows with a blue and green filter over it. I was happy to see the sound effects from the original menus return, but the game certainly lacks a bit of the original's art style and personality. I think they could have done much better, even just to incorporate the gold colour scheme that menu originally had. The Animus barely feels like it's there at all, except for when you load in after fast travelling and we finally see the wavy Animus, imitating the waves of the ocean from the original. Memory corridors are a stark black void that look shoddy and unfinished, and I just really dislike this new evergreen look for the Animus, which by extension just makes Black Flag Resynced look like a retool of Shadows. Overall, I'd say Black Flag Resynced was a really enjoyable experience for me to play, and I still have so much more content for me to complete in the game, which left me wanting more. It's a pretty resounding success, and to be honest, as it should be. you're taking the best Assassin's Creed game that the majority can agree on, and remaking it. There's very little risk, and I'm pleased to say that even then, Ubisoft did. They added extra content and tried to improve the original game in small areas, and in some cases they overstepped for the most part. Like, for example, there are character wrap-ups that weren't in the original that I think they did a really good job and tastefully added in this. I think it makes the game the perfect jumping on point for new fans and for all fans like myself, while still providing more than enough to keep the experience feeling fresh. It has its issues. The new content is certainly a dip in quality, heavily propped up by the original 2013 game, which just makes me worry whether this quality will persist in new, original Assassin's Creed games or be restricted to just the older resynced titles. I think if you're a fan of the original game or a new player interested in a pirate adventure, Black Flag is still the gold standard, and if Ubisoft do continue down the route of resynced titles, I do think this provides a really good benchmark. The big question for everyone will be this: is it better than the original? In many places, yes. You can't deny the visual overhaul and the additional scenes are like gravy on top of this already brilliant game, but the modern Ubisoft slop seeps in places. Not enough to dampen the package, and in many places I was happy to overlook it without a second glance. But yes, they are still there and bring down the quality of the product. I think it's fair to say that this is the best Assassin's Creed game since... Assassin's Creed 4. Do with that what you will. But again, I'd like to thank Ubisoft for providing me with an early review code. Getting to play this game early and compiling my thoughts ahead of release was an extremely relieving experience compared to the chaos I experienced with Shadows last year. I hope it's helped you make your mind up on whether to purchase the game, whatever camp you sit in. Expect a lot more Black Flag Resynced from me in the future. If you'd like to be a part of that, please consider liking the video, hyping and subscribing for more Assassin's Creed content. And I will see you in the next video.